There is a strange kind of frustration that almost everyone experiences at some point. You know exactly what you should be doing. You know you need to study. You know you should work on that project. You know you should exercise, clean your room, answer that message, apply for that job, or finally start the thing you've been thinking about for months. You know what to do. You may have even made a detailed plan, and yet somehow you find yourself doing almost anything else. You check your phone. You watch another video, you reorganize your files, you make coffee, you tell yourself you'll start in 10 minutes, then 10 minutes becomes an hour, and eventually, you go to bed knowing that once again, you didn't do the thing you promised yourself you would do. The frustrating part is that you don't necessarily feel lazy. You might actually be ambitious. You might have big goals and genuinely want to change your life. That's what makes this behavior so confusing. How can someone desperately want a different life while repeatedly avoiding the actions that would create it? The answer is more complicated than laziness, because in many cases, you are not avoiding the task itself. You're avoiding how the task makes you feel. Think about the moment right before you begin something difficult. Maybe you sit down at your computer to work. Suddenly you feel overwhelmed. Maybe the task seems boring. Maybe you are afraid you won't do it well. Maybe you don't know where to begin. Maybe you feel pressure because you know how important the outcome is. And then your phone suddenly becomes incredibly interesting. This is where procrastination begins. Not necessarily with the thought, I don't want to succeed. It often begins with something much simpler. I don't want to feel this right now. Your brain is constantly looking for ways to regulate your emotional state. If something gives you discomfort, your brain naturally looks for relief. And modern life gives us an unlimited supply of immediate relief. A difficult assignment can be replaced with a short video. An uncomfortable thought can be replaced with social media. Boredom can be replaced with entertainment. An uncertain decision can be replaced with endless research. The problem is that the alternative feels better immediately. The task might give you a reward later. Your phone gives you a reward now, and your brain is extremely sensitive to that difference. This creates a powerful cycle. You approach something difficult, you feel discomfort, you escape into something easier. The discomfort disappears, and your brain learns something important. Avoiding this worked. It doesn't learn that the task was harmless. It learns that avoidance was an effective way to feel better. So the next time the same situation appears, the urge to escape becomes even stronger. This is why procrastination can become a habit without you consciously choosing it. You are training your brain every time you escape. But there is another layer to this. Sometimes the thing you're avoiding isn't boredom or effort, it's fear. Imagine that you've wanted to start a business for years, or write a book, or create a YouTube channel, or learn a new skill. You've spent months thinking about it. You've watched tutorials. You've researched the best equipment. You've made plans. You've imagined what your life could look like if you actually succeeded, but you still haven't started. Why? Because thinking about your potential feels safe. Testing it doesn't. As long as you haven't tried, you can still believe that you could be amazing at it. You can imagine yourself becoming successful, disciplined, talented, or creative. But once you actually begin, reality enters the picture. Now you can fail. Now you can discover that you're not as good as you hoped. Now someone can criticize you. Now you have to compare your imagined potential with your actual performance. And that can be uncomfortable. In this way, doing nothing can sometimes protect your self-image. As long as you don't try, your potential remains untouched. You can always tell yourself, I could do it if I really wanted to. But action removes that excuse. This is one reason perfectionism can look surprisingly similar to laziness. A perfectionist might spend weeks thinking about a project while never actually starting it. Not because they don't care, because they care too much. The standard becomes so high that beginning feels dangerous. If I can't do it properly, what's the point? So nothing gets done. The person waits for the perfect plan, the perfect mood, the perfect amount of motivation, the perfect moment. And that moment never arrives. There is another trap that makes this even worse. Learning about change can feel like changing. You watch videos about productivity. You read books about discipline. You build a new morning routine. You download a habit tracker. You create a new schedule. You spend hours thinking about how you're going to become a better version of yourself. And for a moment, you feel productive. But nothing actually happened. This is one of the easiest ways to confuse preparation with progress. Knowledge can create the feeling of movement without requiring the risk of movement. You feel like you're getting closer, but you're standing in the same place. And when the excitement fades, the guilt returns. Now the cycle becomes even more painful. You avoid the task, you feel temporary relief, then you feel guilty because you know you should have done it, so you become disappointed in yourself. You promise that tomorrow will be different. Tomorrow comes. The task is still there, and now it carries even more emotional weight because of yesterday's failure. You feel more pressure. More pressure creates more discomfort. More discomfort creates more avoidance, and the cycle repeats. Avoidance, relief, guilt, more pressure, more avoidance. Eventually, you can start developing an identity around it. I'm just lazy. I'm terrible with discipline. I always ruin everything. I never finish anything. And once you start believing those things, every failed attempt seems to prove them true. But there's something important you need to understand. The fact that you repeatedly avoid something does not necessarily mean that you don't care about it. Sometimes it means the exact opposite. The things we avoid most can be the things that matter most. That's why telling yourself to just try harder often doesn't work. The problem isn't always a lack of discipline. Sometimes the task has become emotionally too large. So the solution is to make the action smaller, much smaller. Instead of telling yourself, I have to finish this entire project, tell yourself, I'm going to work on it for 5 minutes. Instead of, I need to get into shape, tell yourself, I'm going to put on my shoes and walk outside. Instead of, I need to study for 3 hours. Open the book and read 1 page. The point isn't that 5 minutes will magically transform your life. The point is that you're teaching your brain something new. You're showing it that starting does not have to be painful. You are breaking the association between action and overwhelming discomfort. And once you begin, something interesting often happens. The task becomes easier than the anticipation of the task. A lot of the suffering happens before we start. We imagine how difficult something will be. We imagine how long it will take. We imagine how uncomfortable we'll feel. Then we finally begin and realize it wasn't as terrible as our brain predicted. This is why action often has to come before motivation. We tend to think the sequence is motivation, then action, then results. But in real life, it often works the other way. Action creates evidence. Evidence creates confidence. Confidence makes future action easier. You don't need to feel ready before you begin. You need to begin before your brain has time to convince you not to. And this is where ambition becomes important. Ambition without action can become a source of pain because the bigger your dreams are, the more painful it becomes to watch yourself move further away from them. You don't need another motivational speech. You don't necessarily need a better planner. You don't need to completely reinvent yourself tomorrow morning. You may simply need to stop demanding that you become a different person overnight. Start smaller. Make the first action almost embarrassingly easy. Write 1 paragraph. Do 5 push-ups. Open the document. Send the message. Read 1 page. Work for 10 minutes. Then stop or continue if you want. Because the goal at first isn't to become incredibly productive, it's to rebuild trust with yourself. Every time you say you're going to do something and actually do it, you create evidence that you can rely on yourself. And every time you repeatedly promise something and don't follow through, that trust becomes weaker. So perhaps your problem was never that you didn't know what to do. You knew. Maybe you've known for a very long time. The real problem was that doing it made you feel something you didn't want to feel. Boredom, fear, uncertainty, pressure, the possibility of failure, and your brain discovered that avoiding the task gave you immediate relief. But relief is not the same thing as progress, and comfort is not the same thing as happiness. The life you want will probably never be built by one giant burst of motivation. It will be built through thousands of small moments when you decide not to escape discomfort. So the next time you catch yourself saying, I know what I need to do, but I just can't do it, don't immediately call yourself lazy. Pause for a moment, ask yourself what you're actually trying to avoid feeling, and then make the action smaller. Not tomorrow, not when you're motivated, not when you finally become disciplined enough, just smaller. Because sometimes the distance between the person you are and the person you want to become isn't as large as it feels. Sometimes it's just one uncomfortable moment and one very small decision to act anyway.